If you've ever felt lost in the world of IVF, surrogacy, or egg donation, this is the guide you've been waiting for.
Fertility treatment is not linear like that. You have to be able to get through the marathon of everything that we do with the emotions that go with it in order to hit your end objective.
That's Dr. Carrie Bedient, one of the 3 renowned fertility specialists who co-hosts the hit podcast Fertility Docs Uncensored. And now, along with Dr. Abby Eblen and Dr. Susan Hudson, they have co-authored the IVF Blueprint, the very first authoritative guide to IVF. It's everything you love about the podcast: real talk, clear answers, and even a little humor, now in book form.
This book gets you the experience of sitting at your kitchen table with a cup of coffee or a glass of wine with your 3 best friends who all happen to be fertility doctors, who are going to make sure you get through this process because you are their girl or boy or person, however you want to define it.
Inside the book and in this conversation, you'll learn how to navigate a process that can feel overwhelming and what actually matters: IVF protocols, increasing your success rate, and even trending medications like GLP-1s, and why emotional support matters just as much as medical expertise. So, if you want clarity, confidence, and the step-by-step roadmap to make IVF less overwhelming, let's dive in. Enjoy! Okay, Dr. Carrie, I am so excited that we get to talk again. And this time, we're talking about your book. Look at it! Oh my gosh! First of all, congratulations.
Thank you. I just got a huge box of these last night and was dancing around my kitchen.
Yes, you were.
Because I was super
excited. As you should. I love it. Okay, well, I was lucky enough, thank you, to get an advanced copy. And first of all, like right off the bat, you guys hit us in the feels, because we go with Maya Angelou, who, like, queen, and she states in the very beginning, you may encounter many defeats, but you must not be defeated. Okay, instant tears. And, like, how does this quote just sit with y'all when you decided to, like, do this?
I actually have not thought about that in context with us at all. I have just always thought about it in terms of patients because, you know, as fertility docs, like and really any fertility professional, one of your main jobs is as a cheerleader and encouraging people to keep going and to continue on, even when the process is just misery on a stick. And so I hadn't even thought about it in terms of us. And this project was 2 years in the making of doing all of the prep work and deciding on the chapters and who was going to write it and getting 3 physicians to agree on anything.
We're going to touch on that in a second.
Yeah. And so that's actually a really good reminder right now as we're going through this final push before it hits the shelves and it's widely available and all of those things, because we're right there. We're right there.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Well, yeah, no, I mean, it really, I feel like it's such a great premise to what this book is. But before we kind of break it down, obviously, most of us know you from the Fertility Docs Uncensored podcast. Can you take us back to, you said this was 2 years in the making. Mm-hmm. Take us back when the idea of the IVF Blueprint was even born.
So when we first got together as podcasters, it was at a meeting, at a dinner at this particular meeting, and a couple glasses of wine later. It was the best idea ever to make a podcast. Well, if COVID hadn't shut the entire world down, I don't know how we would have continued, because it forced us to figure out how to do this over Zoom and all of the online platforms and recording that way. And so once we realized, oh, this is going to be a thing, we're going to be able to do this, we started to say, okay, let's open up to listener questions, because there's the whole goal of everything we're doing is how do we make this information accessible to normal people who aren't necessarily sitting in our kitchens with us or, in our office after hours with their feet up on the desk, or actually on the small drawer that I pull out that is right at footstool level. And how do we make this accessible? And so I would say relatively early on, once we decided, hey, this is going to fly, we put on the bucket list, we're going to write a book. And fast forward 2-3 years later, Abby Evelyn, who's from Nashville, was like, I'm just going to write the proposal and I'm going to write up, one chapter. You guys are going to edit it. She put together the whole proposal. She found us an agent, and then the whole thing took off, and it just happened. It just happened.
Wow, that's amazing. For listeners who already tune into the show, what's something new that they'll get from the book versus listening to the show?
It's in one place, and they don't have to search around. They don't have to find it. Because in the show, we release an episode every single week. And typically the way that we choose our episodes is what is trending in our clinics? What are we hearing the most about? And what questions did we get just hammered with that week? Because I don't know if you notice this in your world of surrogacy, but I feel like my clinic follows a theme of the week. And I won't hear about fibroids forever, and then all of a sudden it's 6 patients in a row. And then I won't hear about, using donor sperm for a same-sex couple where they have already had one child together. Like, it's very weird how specific some of these themes can get. And so we're just talking about that on the show. Well, this book is a condensed, organized approach to it, because we go from the very beginning all the way through the IVF process. And so with a podcast, you can find all of that. It's not linear because our clinics aren't linear. And you've got everybody from the very beginning to bringing back a baby for a visit. And so this is a very organized, condensed book that you can shove in your pocket. You can stick a bookmark in. And as much as I love technology, yes, you technically can do that with podcasts and online reading and all those things. It's a hell of a lot easier to just do with a hard copy book that you shove in your purse, and you can say, okay, I need to flip to this because this is where I am right now.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. You guys do such a great job. I mean, IVF Blueprint, truly hit the nose on the head. You really did a great job of it's a roadmap. I mean, it's all part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. It's all there, and there's no mystery about, what the chapters are. You really can just flip to it. It's perfect. As far as, I think, yes, it's so informational, but you guys do touch on kind of the emotional roller coaster that is IVF. And you even share, some personal experiences within that. Why was it important to be so candid rather than keeping it strictly clinical?
Because one of the biggest reasons that people bail on fertility treatment is not the money, it's not the complexity, it's the emotions. It's that it is as overwhelming as a cancer diagnosis. And there is a study to show that. That is not just lip service to anything. And so if you cannot manage the emotions, it doesn't matter how amazing you are in every other respect. You're not going to be able to get through. And so you need that support group. You need to know I'm not alone in this. You need to know I'm not crazy. You need to know all of those things, and that the feelings you're going to have about your significant other, of everything from the intense adoration to the I hate you, why are we doing this? And all of the things that happen in between, that is all normal. Because if you can validate the emotions and you can ground somebody in I'm not insane. This is really happening. I have this range of emotions, and you can validate their experience as they're going through 0 to 100. Then they can get through everything. Because I don't know if you notice this with your patients, but my patients are type A, organized, go-getters, and giving them an objective, that's not the problem. It's having them deal with all these feelings and emotions that they feel like, I don't have time for this. this is not who I am. This is not what I do. I see the goal. I get the goal. And fertility treatment is not linear like that. You have to be able to get through the marathon of everything that we do with the emotions that go with it in order to hit your end objective. And frankly, I think it's good training for parenthood, because people say, oh, fertility treatment's so emotional. Well, dude, parenthood.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
No, for sure. You've touched on, I mean, yes, IVF patients, third party, intended parents, or just starting out, across the board.
All of it.
I feel like it's one of the most motivated, just groups of people. Yeah. And so you have a lot of individuals who are, okay, how can we have the highest success rate? What can we do? What are the things that I can, be in control of? That's, a big one right there. And honestly, in the world of IVF, like, we all love our good luck charms, and we all love our, socks and our pineapples and our pomegranate juice and all of the things. Yeah. And I love that it was chapter chapter 6. Chapter 6. You guys touched on just the lifestyle in preparation for IVF. And obviously, most of our audience is third party. And one of the things that I think you do a great job in addressing is the supplement category. And I know this is such a specific question, but what should patients and intended parents really look for when it comes to those vitamins and supplements? Because again, you address, like, companies make these big promises, and there's not a lot of backup behind that.
Yeah.
How can we avoid getting taken advantage of? Because there was this really great breakdown of companies that I had not heard of before.
So looking at the third-party verification and third party in the same sense of third party reproduction, but third party in terms of having someone outside the company validate what they're doing. And the USP and NSF, I'm pretty sure I'm getting those initials right. I look at them every single time I say them just to make sure I'm getting the right set. But making sure that there's those two validations on whatever supplement you're buying. And you don't need both. One is fine. Or there's something equivalent. For example, I know with a set of vitamins from Luminary, they actually use an independent British, like a European approval system, which is in some ways stricter than what we see in the US. And so as long as there is a third-party verification that what you're getting is actually what you're getting, because what most people don't realize is if you get a blood pressure medication that's approved by the FDA, there are very strict rules of if you test 10 bottles of that exact same medication, you are going to get very close to the exact same thing in every single bottle and every single pill. Supplements don't have to play by those rules. So you can have the same bottle, two next to each other, and one's got a much higher content than the other one because of the variations in the manufacturing process. And so getting that independent verification is really helpful. And also actually talking with your doc, because supplement fatigue is real. And when you start, you think, oh, I'm totally going to take ABC, XYZ, LMNOQP, like the whole alphabet of them. And the first week you're doing it, you're like, I'm doing things for myself. I'm going to make this process more successful. By the time you're a month in, that's a lot of pills. It is very expensive, and it's mentally weighing, because to wake up every morning and be staring at a pill box of 12 different horse pills that you need to take is hard. And there's enough hard with what we're doing. We don't need to add to it. And so really knowing some of the data, knowing what is worth my time and what's not, can be really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. No, I love that. We'll get right back to the show, but I wanted to take a quick moment to speak directly to those of you dreaming of growing your family. For the past 18 years, we at Egg Donor and Surrogate Solutions have had the privilege of walking alongside hopeful parents, guiding them through egg donation and surrogacy with empathy, expertise, and personal experience. Many of us on the team have been intended parents or surrogates or egg donors ourselves, so we understand just how important this journey is. Whether you're just starting to explore your options or ready to take the next step, we're here to help. You can schedule a free 15-minute call with our team at createahappyfamily.com to get your questions answered and see if we're the right fit for your journey. You don't have to figure this out alone. This is your invitation to learn more and take the next step toward the family you've been dreaming of. All right, let's get back to the show. Okay, I want to break down some of, the fun that was in here, and I love this has always been a big thing for me, but I love that you addressed just right off the bat the imperfection of BMI. And but you have, some doctors and IPs who really, really focus on BMI, and will have gestational carriers and donors who have had perfectly healthy pregnancies or lead perfectly healthy, lives. And we have to say, I'm sorry, you're ineligible right now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the possibility of a different measure of health in the near future? And really, why is BMI so important?
BMI is a measurement, for anyone who doesn't know. It's a measurement of height and weight taken in relation to each other. Because, for example, you can have someone who is, I had a woman yesterday that I saw for a physical exam, and she was 220 pounds. Well, she was 6'2". And so her 220 pounds are very appropriate for the frame of her body. If you find that same 220 pounds on someone who is 5'1", that is a very different distribution. And so BMI helps to take into account what height does to weight. Now, it doesn't necessarily take into account what muscle mass does, what your vascular health is, all of those things. And so it is an imperfect measure. But I think it's a much better measure than just straight weight is. And most of us don't have the resources to say, okay, we're going to check your blood sugar for a week after every meal, and we're going to have you run a cardiac fitness test, and we're going to have you get, I mean, we do have a ton of labs that we get, but labs are only a portion of the story. We're not going to see how much you sleep. And I don't know how much in the future things like the Oura Ring or other Apple Watches, other body biometrics that you can get. I don't know how much that's going to play a part, but right now we're still very much in the information data gathering phase with those types of things, and figuring out what information is just information and what information is actionable. And so I think there may be a point in the future where we are able to rely on that and use data that is, instead of one height and one weight, it's 25 different categories of what's your heartbeat and what's your temperature and what's your restfulness and how well do you sleep and all of those things. What's your cycle like? Those types of things. And so right now, BMI is kind of what we have to go on. Now, if someone is a weightlifter, that is a very different thing than if you're a couch potato. Someone who's 6'2" is very different than someone who is 5'2" in the same weight category, but their BMI hopefully evens that out a little bit. And so every clinic is different. There are definitely components of just physicality that no matter how healthy someone is, the more weight they have, it can be very physically challenging to get their eggs. And they do have higher risks for when we put them under anesthesia. And so some of these things are not going anywhere independent of BMI, because it doesn't matter what your BMI is. If you have a ton of extra weight and tissue around your neck, around your chest, that makes getting oxygen into you much more difficult. And when we're doing a procedure like an egg retrieval, that is a big deal, because apparently you need oxygen to live. Who knew? Yeah.
No, so. I appreciate that, because again, I think weight in general, particularly in women, it's a hot button, topic for sure. But you guys do a great job of breaking down the why, and you even do it later on in the chapters, which I really appreciate, how you guys go back and forth between here's the groundwork and then how you see the groundwork later. Okay, still on the subject of, again, another hot topic in chapter 5, you guys bring up those GLP-1s that I feel like are everywhere right now.
Yes.
Can you walk us through what we know about them when it comes to fertility? And are there specific concerns when it comes to gestational carriers using them?
Yeah. So we actually we partnered with Forum Health, and this was in, I want to say January of 2024. It might have been January of 2023. And we did 3 separate episodes on the podcast about this because it is such a big, important topic. And these medications are revolutionary. And the funny thing is that they're revolutionary after they've been in existence for a decade or more.
Of course.
And so these medications have been around for a while in the context of treating diabetes because they are very helpful in moderating blood sugar by impacting what you take into your body. And one of the really valuable things about these medications is that you can take them once a week because many medications, we have the structure of the compound that needs to be ingested for whatever medical thing you are treating, but it's the delivery system and it's the length of time that it sticks around because it's only been relatively recently that we have been able to get a long-acting medication like the semaglutides, like the tirzepatides, all of that class of medications. And so it makes it much more attainable of you take this injection once a week and then you just keep taking it weekly as opposed to having to give continuous injections like you would see with someone who is a type 1 diabetic who requires insulin, having to wear a pump all the time, all of the measures that you may need to do to control your blood sugar as a diabetic or really any other chronic medical condition. And so the semaglutides have been around for quite some time. It's just once a medication's been around for a while, you have the original purpose that it was created for, and then you figure out what side effects are actually effects that you want to capitalize on. And we see this a lot. A good example of this is Wellbutrin. It's an antidepressant, but used in different doses, it helps people stop smoking. Another use for the antidepressants is to treat hot flashes. It's not going to be in the same dose as what you would need to have the antidepressant effect, but if you take it in a really low dose, it can control your hot flashes. And so the longer something's been around, the longer we've had the opportunity to figure out what other effects does it have. And in the case of the GLP-1s, what you find is that it really changes the hormonal perception of fullness and it changes some of those neurotransmitters. And so it decreases the cravings. It decreases I call it food chatter that
Sure.
happens in your brain. And so those of us who constantly think about food, you get up in the morning, you're like, okay, well, what am I going to take for my lunch today? What am we going to have for dinner tonight? I'm having friends over on Friday. What am I going to make them? What am I going to bring to the potluck? Where your thoughts are just constantly inundated with food chatter, it helps to cut that. And I think that there will probably be a future of these medications in addiction as well, with alcohol, with other drugs. I think that it's not the full story, but I think there's a component of that we are just learning more and more about. So we nailed the GLPs with diabetes relatively early on. Now we're finding out the weight loss side effects. And I think that will continue on as we get more and more information about these and have more people on them. You'll figure out both the good side effects and the bad side effects.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we've already seen, I feel like it was 2 years ago where it was, Woman on People magazine, I, started taking Ozempic and now I'm, pregnant and I had been trying for 3 years and, things like that. So you're seeing kind of, the residual effects of, just that alone. You made mention, yes, totally great to be on them, but you do need to be off of them during a cycle. And really, yeah. Is there concern about them? Is it I'm assuming it's just a nutrition issue.
There's a couple of different concerns. So if someone's going through a donor cycle, we want them off 2 weeks prior to having anesthesia because it slows down your gut motility. And you don't want to put someone to sleep with a completely full stomach that maybe they followed all the directions. They didn't eat after midnight the night before. But if you're on a GLP-1, your gut motility is slowed. And so your stomach is still highly likely to be full. And we don't want that fluid coming back up into your lungs because that is a very bad day for everyone involved. And so, so that's one of the concerns. And that's part of the reason why egg donors, we have to have you come off of them so that we can safely put you to sleep, or anyone who's going through an egg retrieval for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
For gestational carriers, the half-life of these medications is quite long. That's what makes them so valuable, in that you can take a medication dose once a week and have it work all the way through. Typically, we want a medication to have gone through 5 half-lives before we consider it generally out of the system. And a half-life is the time that it takes for 50% of the drug in your body to go away. And so for the GLPs, their half-life is easily a week or longer. And so you really need to be off for a minimum of a month. And the recommendation is actually 2 months to have it fully out of your system. When you have someone who's getting pregnant, part of the concern is we just don't know what it's going to do to the baby. And
Mm,
that information will come as more and more people are on these medications. More and more people will get accidentally pregnant on them, not intending to, but they're taking the medication. And so we'll get more of that data. But right now, we don't want to mess with any of the blood sugar metabolism as you're growing a baby, because we want to make sure that there's no negative impact down the line. And so what you find with most medications, no matter what they are, women and children, women of childbearing age, pregnant women and children are the last people to get approved. There's very few
mm-hmm.
pediatric, relatively, medications that are fully approved, because no drug company is going to run the study on kids. That is
Right.
that is a losing proposition, because if anything happens to those kids, they're liable for it. And the same thing happens with pregnant women. And so the way that we will get that data is through decades of use, where we just follow them and say, okay, you happened to get pregnant while you were taking this medication. What was the outcome? Was your kid okay? Was there a smaller birth size? Was there any compromise in their growth? Was there anything that happened during this that really made an impact that we need to know about, and that's going to go on the black box warnings?
Okay. No, that makes a lot of sense. And again, I just, the way that you talk about these things is exactly how this book is written. It is such a great breakdown of these big, huge topics that feel overwhelming. And you even said it in the introduction. Everybody first goes to Dr. Google. This is that great breakdown of Dr. Google can have a lot of this information. And
Mm-hmm.
even when you get there and you try and find a reputable site, you can't read it unless you have a medical degree. So, again, these are great things to know about. And you guys do such a great job of breaking it down. One of the things, it made me smile, because when I would educate women who were coming in to be surrogates, I would always say every clinic has their own secret sauce. Every
Mm-hmm.
doctor has their own protocol. And you
Mm-hmm.
even said, I love it. It was, get 5 doctors in a room, and particularly with progesterone, I guarantee you everybody will, be fighting about, just
Yes.
the proper way, or, how it's going to get transferred, all of that.
Yes.
Can you break down just maybe why does everybody have their own secret sauce?
If there was one right way to do it, we would all be doing it. If
Sure.
there was one proven way, if you do this and this and this, you will have a 100% success rate. Whatever the highest is, there is no question we would all be doing it. I mean, there is no question when you're doing a programmed embryo transfer cycle, everybody uses progesterone, because that is a right answer. You have to use progesterone when you're
Right.
doing a program cycle. You have to have progesterone on board. Now, how you give it, when you give it, the dose you give, all of that's up for debate. It is not up for debate that you need progesterone for an embryo to implant. And so there are things that are very concrete that we know. But because of all of the difficulties in doing studies on women of reproductive age, and when someone is pregnant, especially in the early first trimester, where that's when everything about the baby is forming, that's when you're getting organogenesis, that's when you are getting some of your biggest growth, that's when all of those external substances really have the potential to make a huge difference. People are very, very wary of giving anything that doesn't have a lot of data behind it. And there will be, in every new drug's life, there will always be a point when there is no data behind it. And it's just
Mhm.
logic. Does this make sense? Yes, it does. Okay, let's give it a shot with all of the appropriate counseling, of course. But if there was one right way to do it, we would all be doing it. And there isn't. every person is different, every body is different, every lab is different. There are things that, when, for example, Susan Hudson, one of the other authors, and I are talking, she does all program cycles because a lot of her patients are coming from Corpus Christi, Texas, 3 hours away from San Antonio, where her lab is. And so she has to do program cycles because that's how they're going to work in terms of timing. For a lot of my patients, when they are coming from China, when they are coming from France, when they're coming from Australia, we have to use a birth control pill to help get their cycle regulated because that's a really large plane ticket to have to organize, buy, and go on the whim of your period. And so there's a lot of things that play into this that aren't just the straight medicine. It's the logistics of what we're doing and how we have to go about it. Someone who has all of their patients within a 30-mile range can do very different types of cycles than someone whose patients are coming halfway around the world. And so I would say that most of us have the assortment of treatments at our fingertips. I can think of a handful of different treatments that I like to use for transfers, but it's going to be very different. Do I have a GC coming from across the country? Do I have an IP coming from another place in the world? Do I have someone who lives down the street from my clinic? And so that's why there's a lot of this variation, because we're thinking about how do we get it for you? How do we nail your body's physiology, your experience, your travel, the big picture?
Yeah. No, I feel you guys wrote, when your physician recommends a particular protocol, there's usually a reason. And even in the intro, you said there's more than one way to accomplish the same result. And I thought that this was really such a helpful way of framing things. Do you ever wish that there was an exact science, or do you think the nuance is actually kind of part of the beauty of all of this?
I think the answer to both of those questions is yes.
Sure.
Because cookbook medicine is easier. I mean, It is easier for me to tell a patient, no, you have to do this. This is tried and true and proven, and this is what we are doing. Period, end of story. This is not a point up for discussion. But very few things in life actually work like that. And so as a result, part of the reason most of us go into this field is because we like the nuance. We like the art of ART, of assisted reproductive technologies, because you get 5 doctors in a room, you're going to have at least 8 opinions. And being able to work through that and figuring out, okay, which patient deserves this protocol, which patient will be better served by that protocol, which clinic, which type of lab environment, which whatever it may be, that is part of what makes this job so much fun and so appealing, because it's not a cookbook medicine. You can't necessarily be a monkey and do this again and again and again. You have to look at the person in front of you and go, okay, what do we have to work with here? Because some of those protocol changes have very little to do with the physiology, and they have everything to do with the person who's sitting in front of you. Someone who's very, very anxious about timing and about unexpected events, you may do differently than someone who has an emphasis on, I want to do everything that is as quote unquote natural as possible. And you approach those two people differently. And that's what makes it fun. And that's what helps them to get through it. And I like those nuances because it keeps me entertained of how can I best serve this patient and get them through in a way that will not leave them going to therapy for an extra 10 years after this because the process was so damaging.
For sure. How does that ideology transfer into third-party reproduction, particularly with surrogates? Where I know in my experience, when there was a failed cycle, you sometimes have, doctors that, just say, okay, well, let's do it again. Let's try again. But then you have other doctors who are like, okay, hold on, let's throw the kitchen sink at it. Or you have doctors are kind of like, well, okay, go find a different surrogate, which, by the way, surrogates don't grow on trees, so let's not do that. But,
No.
Yeah.
It's with surrogacy in particular, there are so many more challenges because most of the time when physicians are treating a patient, they are treating one patient. In IVF, by default, you have two patients because you usually have two halves of the equation, whether it's two moms, two dads, a mom and a dad, whatever it may be. When you add in surrogacy, you add not only a third party in the surrogate, but you usually add a fourth party in the agency or whoever's working with them. Sometimes you might have a donor as well. And so you've gone from having just one person as a patient to two, because you're talking about the adult person and the fetus in there, and then there's usually a partner and then a surrogate, and there's this growing flower of people who are going to make this happen. And so you have to figure out, how do we adapt to this? And with surrogates, the other considerations in play are, where is she coming from? How far away is she? How close is she in where she lives to a monitoring center? Because it's very different if I've got someone who lives in a big city versus someone who lives 4 hours outside of the nearest anything.
Right.
And what kind of protocol do we use? Because a protocol that is a very natural cycle based protocol, that person has to be able to get to the monitoring much more quickly, has to be able to get on the plane with much less notice. And that's very different than a program cycle, where it's much, much easier to say, you're going to go in on this day, and you're going to go in on this day, and you're going to go in on this day, and you're going to get on a plane on this day to come to get the transfer. What their home life is makes a difference. So if you've got a surrogate who's got amazing childcare at the drop of a hat, that's very different than someone who is going to have to fly her mom in from some other city to watch her kids while she goes for the transfer. And all of those play into consideration. Then you layer the intended parents on top of it, because they've got a huge emotional investment, they've got a huge financial investment, and they've got the time investment in all of this. And so they don't want to wait a second longer than they have to get this thing that they have been working for usually years by the time we get to the point of surrogacy. And so you have to layer all of those things on. And so a protocol that I'm much more willing to do on a patient who lives 15 minutes down the street, whether she's a surrogate or not, is very different than someone who has all of these other things riding on them, where, yeah, maybe I don't want to mess with the natural cycle quite so much. Maybe I do want to do at least a little bit of Lupron going in so that we can really line it up and make it as easy and as stressless as possible to get to the transfer. Because it's not ever just about me and what's convenient for me to do as a physician. It's, let's layer in all these other people and get to the best solution for everybody that's going to get us the highest success rate, but also is not going to do collateral damage in the process, at least that we can avoid.
When do you make that decision, as far as, okay, you've done XYZ protocol and this just isn't working and you have to break that match? And I know that's not taken lightly.
Not at all.
What are usually those kind of, I guess, checklist when you're having to make that?
Yeah. Breaking a match is never done flippantly, because we know full well how long it takes to find a surrogate, how hard it is to find one, how hard it is to find one who is a good match for whatever couple they're working with, where everything lines up. And so nobody likes to break matches unless they have to. And so some of the things are very obvious. If you have a non-compliant surrogate,
Absolutely.
That's easy. If you have a medical condition that has changed. So for example, if you do a transfer and someone has, let's say they have a miscarriage, which in and of itself is not necessarily a problem and a cause for match break. But, let's say that while she's going through that, she has a blood clot. That's a medical reason where it's real easy to say, okay, I'm really sorry, we're done. You cannot be a surrogate.
Yeah.
The other reasons are much more nuanced, because you have to look at it and say, is this an embryo issue? When we thought, not only did we get PGT, not only did it become a blast, not only did it survive the thaw, how did it look like when we put it in? Because if you had a really gorgeous, stellar embryo that comes from a donor that's PGT tested, that there's nothing lingering behind, that is a different story than when you put in an embryo that came from a 41-year-old IP, where there's no PGT testing, and there's a really high chance that it's the embryo that was the problem. And so when we look at it, we look at the embryos that are going in. were these gorgeous embryos that we think should have stuck? If so, you're a little more inclined to match break. Were these really poor looking embryos that the surrogate did everything right? She did everything she was supposed to. Her lining did everything it was supposed to. We think that this is not really related to her. Many of us will give, I would say, at least 2, usually 3 attempts of transferring before we'll do a match break. Now, there's other reasons where sometimes no matter what you do with a surrogate, her lining just doesn't cooperate. And this is where having all those protocols at our fingertips is really helpful, because I have a surrogate who we've been working with her for probably 5 months now. And every single time there's fluid in that lining. It doesn't matter what we do. We've tried natural cycles, program cycles, modified natural, every variation, every different type of medication you can go through, and just her lining will not cooperate. And so there becomes a point where you just have to say, okay, this isn't working. I don't know why. I don't blame anybody involved. Like, this is not someone's fault. It's just, this is what it is, and we need to match break, and we need to find somebody else because of all of the things that pile onto a surrogacy journey: the time, the money, the emotions, the goal that you're trying to reach. And so that plays a role as well, because most clinics, it's a lot of work to get a surrogate in. And that's just from our part. That's not even from your part, where you have to find them and match them. and so, once I know I've got a surrogate who's medically cleared, we want to hang on to her as much as possible. Now, you don't necessarily have to change the protocol every single time. You can give the exact same protocol. 1 month it doesn't work, the next month it does, and there's no rhyme or reason to it. It's just the body changes month by month, which is the beauty of it. But it does make it more challenging as you're going through.
Mm-hmm. No, for sure. For sure. I love that. If you could put a sticky note inside of every reader's copy, what would it say?
You got this.
Mm.
You can do this. I have faith in you. It's women are, and couples, parents who want to be parents, are a force of nature. And there's not a doubt in my mind that you got this, you can do this. And in general, we can get everybody to a family. Now, sometimes it's prohibitively expensive or time consuming or things like that. But given enough time and money, we can figure out a way to get you a family. May take a donor, may take a surrogate. Like, we will get you there. It's just, do you have the resilience to get through it? And I think the vast majority of people, when they decide to, they do. So you got this. I have faith in you. You totally got this.
When you look back at writing the book, was there a part that just feels maybe the most personal to you?
I think I wrote a lot of that 4th section. So the way that we wrote it going through is we divided it up equally. Each of us took a third, and you would write that primary chapter, and then you would run it through the other 2. And we ran it through each other so many times that now there are chapters where I have to go back and think, was I the primary on this, or was it one of the other girls? But I was the primary author for a lot of section 4, which is gestational carriers, egg donors and sperm donors, LGBTQIA+, those chapters, the egg freezing chapter. And I really enjoyed writing those chapters, because there's not that good information out there. And I don't see a whole lot of published information. You can find stuff on websites, you can find stuff by talking to people, by listening to podcasts, things like that. But there's not a whole lot of sanctioned by the establishment, I guess, information where you find it in an actual book form where there's credibility behind it. And there's, all 3 of us authors have MDs in our titles. We are all double boarded. We are all giving that weight to that material, that yes, this is important. Yes, people need to do this to conceive their families. And that's true for populations that are considered non-mainstream, which is a whole other podcast in and of itself, because I have a lot of 4-letter words that I can approach that.
And heard.
Yeah. But but giving that weight to that and giving the weight to the alternatives that even heteronormative heterosexual couples face a lot of issues with getting an egg donor, getting a sperm donor, using a surrogate, that I think it makes their journeys unnecessarily hard. And so I really appreciated writing those chapters because it meant that I got to share a lot of knowledge that is very specialized, that nobody taught me in fellowship, that I had to learn through experience and by working with my clinic and all of my amazing staff members and my partners. And I really enjoy pulling all of that together and presenting that so that people have this resource that they otherwise don't have in such a concise, compact, sanctioned, for lack of a better word, way. Because when you've got a big five publisher that says, yeah, this is important, it lends credibility to it. And so I'm really glad that we can do that because it should.
I completely agree because, I mean, you know, exactly like you said, there's not a lot out there. And if it's out there, it's usually from, you know, a magazine, a headline, or a, you know, really awful romance novel or something. And so it's, you know, it's, there's books about IVF, sure, but there's not, well, what happens when it's not the reader doing, you know, the IVF and, you know, FET process. And so I love that it is very well addressed, and is there for exactly like you said, there's credibility, there's thoughts behind it, you know, all of that. So thank you. No, I really do appreciate that. If you could sum up the IVF Blueprint in one sentence, or maybe I might make it easier on you, what would be your one takeaway for a reader for this book?
The takeaway for this book is this book gets you the experience of sitting at your kitchen table with a cup of coffee or a glass of wine with your three best friends who all happen to be fertility doctors, who are going to make sure you get through this process because you are their girl or boy or person, however you want to define it. But that's what I want people to take away from this, is that this was written with the intent to get a normal, non-medical person through this really intense time. It's highly technical, it's highly complex. There's a ton of research, there's a ton of data behind it. And this is the approach that I would give, and frankly have given, to my girlfriends who've gone through this, of, okay, I'm going to sit you down and I'm going to tell you exactly what you're going to expect and what you're going to go through. And we're going to take it one chunk at a time so it is manageable for what you're going through. And that's what I want you to get. And that's what we really want to get from the book, is we want our reader to feel like she's or he's sitting right there with us as we're just shooting the breeze on a Saturday afternoon talking about, hey, what's going on in your life.
Perfect. Beautiful. And I would say job well done and definitely accomplished for sure.
Thank you.
Okay, my last question, and you know it's coming. What filled your cup today? As I sit here drinking my, I won't even say what number it is, cup of coffee, but what has filled your cup this very early morning for you, Dr. Carrie?
I think that my answer this time is the exact same as my answer last time, which is getting to sit here and talk to you and have a lovely conversation. This is a beautiful way to start my day. It's very calm. It's like, it's what we shoot for in the podcast and the book. It's like I'm sitting here talking with my best buddy, and I'm really kind of annoyed that you live in Houston because that's far away from here.
I know, but we would get nothing done. We would accomplish absolutely nothing. Oh, we would. We would solve all the world's problems, and
Yes, yeah, all of the above. All of the above. This is a very lovely way to start my day, and is calm and is sweet and gives me energy to go into whatever chaos the day is going to bring.
100%. Well, this is definitely a great way to start my day. And again, I so appreciate you coming back on. Okay. September 23rd.
Yes.
The IVF Blueprint. You can get it at all of the big bookstores, all online. But yeah, everybody go check it out. It's beautiful. It's absolutely, yeah. Job well done, you guys.
Thank you so much. Thank you.